The 13 provincial and territorial leaders are in Ottawa today getting ready for the First Minister's Conference with the Prime Minister on Thursday. Indigenous leaders aren't part of that meeting. However, Prime Minister Mark Carney did announce at the December AFN gathering in Ottawa that a joint First Minister's meeting with First Nation leaders was in the works. For more on that proposed meeting, we're joined by APTN National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Liebenack. National Chief, thank you for speaking with us. As mentioned, First Nations will not be at the table for the First Minister's meeting in Ottawa on Thursday, but Prime Minister Mark Carney did promise a future meeting with himself, the premiers, and First Nations leaders. Can you tell us when that might happen?
Absolutely. Look, first of all, I just want to say we look forward to the First Minister's meeting on First Nations issues later this year. It's long overdue. A lot of work is needed to address the long-standing socioeconomic gaps that exist in this country. It's also very timely, of course, because we're facing threats from the South. We're facing unity challenges here at home on separatist movements like in Alberta and in Quebec. So a national meeting on First Nations issues is something that chiefs have fought very hard for, First Nations have fought very hard for, and we want to make sure that it's done right. So since the Prime Minister had made the commitment in December, I also want to uplift all the premiers of the country who are united as well in our push when we had asked to push for a First Minister's meeting, that they're in unison with us. So I want to thank the premiers for that. We've also been talking with elders, of course, with the APTN National Executive and chiefs across the country and First Nations experts. Next month in Montreal, chiefs and business leaders are invited to a national forum to discuss economic priorities related to the First Nations economy. And based on what we've heard so far, some common themes are emerging. First of all, that this First Minister's meeting can't be a one and done. We need ongoing federal and provincial processes to make sure that there is follow through and accountability. 20 years between meetings is not acceptable. Second, that we can't rush this planning. It was a mistake to ram Bill C-5 through last year, as you recall, and it would be a mistake again to have this First Minister's meeting without giving time to co-develop the agenda properly with First Nations and First Nations chiefs and councils.
National Chief, at the December AFN Assembly, the Prime Minister said it would be First Nations people who would set the priorities for that meeting. What do you see those priorities being? You talked about it a bit there. I'm thinking about inadequate housing and a lack of consultation from the feds, that being flagged time and time again, but also, like you said, the need for more police resources in First Nations.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, policing, water is another issue. I know that there's disparities in the conversations. I'm going to say First Nations are wanting water for all Canadians. If there's one thing that our people are good at, it's making sure that we stick up for the rights of everybody and the future generations. We can't just think of the here and now when it comes to water. And I know that there's some provincial jurisdictions that when we look, for instance, on a First Nations water bill, I know that those conversations are uncomfortable to have, but they're so important. When it comes to policing, there's all these different regions and silos, and we've seen, we want to talk about, for instance, ICE, for instance. I don't know, I'm just going to say it, and I haven't said it before, but we're concerned when we see two people killed down in the States. Well, down here in Canada, when was that? Not last year, the year before, in over 4 months, there was 15 First Nations people killed over 4 months. And, just this year alone, I think there's, my staff are getting the numbers from yesterday, but looking at some of those numbers are really shocking. And we have to go back towards policing as an essential service. We're underserved on First Nations communities, meaning we don't have police forces or limited, but yet off-reserve we're over-policed and we end up incarcerated. So I know that those are uncomfortable conversations, but we do need to talk about policing across this country. And I know that even the RCMP has different divisions, and Quebec has, different entities, and we need to have that conversation on policing and, of course, other issues like the infrastructure gap, between Canadians and First Nations. And, you see, the disparity when it comes to education. So lots of different issues. There's like I said, there's no shortage. What do we want to change for ourselves? And I'd like to hear from First Nations about that. And keep an eye on our website. And, I want to hear from First Nations people, on let's change the trajectory for our kids and leave them a better life.
APTN National Chief, will have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time.
Shimigwich. Thank you.